Carl Jung discovered that empaths cannot stop suffering until they release one specific attachment. And it's the most painful thing to let go of, because it feels like losing your identity itself. If you've tried therapy, boundaries, self-care, energy protection, but still feel depleted by others' emotions, still absorb pain you can't process, still sacrifice yourself for people who don't reciprocate, you haven't released what I call the core empath wound, and without releasing it, no other healing technique will work. Jung identified the exact attachment empaths cling to that causes endless suffering, why releasing it feels like death, and the counterintuitive technique that makes the release possible. But it requires you to stop doing the one thing empaths believe makes them valuable. The attachment reveals itself in one specific pattern you probably experience daily. In 1923, Jung treated a patient, we'll call her Clara, who'd been an empath her entire life. She absorbed everyone's pain until she couldn't feel her own emotions anymore. Clara came to Jung's practice in Zurich completely depleted. She'd spent years trying every healing technique available: meditation to ground herself, strict boundaries with toxic people, therapy to understand her patterns, even cutting off entire friend groups who drained her energy. Nothing worked. She was still drowning in others' suffering. She told Jung, "I can feel everyone's pain except my own. I know when my mother is sad before she does. I can sense my husband's anxiety from another room. I absorb my children's fear like a sponge, but I've lost myself completely. I don't know what I actually feel anymore." Jung recognized something Clara couldn't see. She wasn't trying to stop absorbing others' pain. She was trying to keep absorbing it, while somehow not suffering from it. The healing techniques weren't failing. She was using them to maintain the very pattern that was destroying her. He told her something that changed everything. You cannot heal as long as you cling to the one thing that makes you feel significant. The empath's deepest attachment is the belief that you matter only when carrying others' pain. Until you release this, you'll keep seeking situations where you can suffer for others. This is the wound beneath the wound. Not sensitivity itself, but the equation you learned in childhood. I am important when I absorb suffering. Here's what Jung understood that most empaths miss. Your gift isn't the problem. Your attachment to proving your significance through that gift is the problem. Empaths develop a specific survival strategy early in life. In childhood, you learned that absorbing others' emotions made you essential. When you felt mom's sadness and tried to fix it, you became important. When you sensed dad's anger and managed it, you became necessary. When you carried your siblings' pain, you became the family savior. The sensitivity was natural, but the equation, I matter when I carry pain, was learned, and that equation became your identity. Modern neuroscience explains why this attachment forms so powerfully. Dr. Joachim Bauer's research on mirror neurons shows that empaths have heightened neural mirroring systems. You literally feel others' emotions in your own body through neural resonance. But here's the critical insight. Having mirror neurons isn't the wound. Needing others' pain to feel like you matter is the wound. Studies on highly sensitive people by Dr. Elaine Aron reveal that 20% of the population has this heightened sensitivity. But not all highly sensitive people become codependent. Not all empaths deplete themselves. The difference is whether you attached your sense of significance to your sensitivity. Clara had attached her entire identity to being the one who carries everyone's burden. Without that role, she feared she was nothing. Jung saw this pattern repeatedly in his practice. Empaths who came to him weren't suffering from too much feeling. They were suffering from the belief that their feelings only mattered when they were feeling for others. The attachment operates like an addiction. You unconsciously seek situations where people need you to absorb their pain. You feel most alive when you're depleted. You experience purpose through sacrifice. The very thing destroying you has become the foundation of your identity. This is why healing techniques fail. You're trying to set boundaries while keeping the attachment. You're trying to protect your energy while believing you're only important when giving it away. You're trying to stop absorbing pain while unconsciously seeking people who need you to absorb it. Empaths equate their sense of purpose with suffering for others, which makes releasing this attachment feel like ego death. If you've tried every healing technique but still feel depleted, comment, "I need to be needed," because understanding why you cling to this belief reveals the 3 patterns that keep you trapped in endless suffering. Jung discovered that the hidden belief, "I matter when I carry others' pain," manifests in 3 specific patterns. Each pattern feels like caring. Each pattern is actually self-destruction, disguised as love. Clara's pattern became visible in their second session. Jung asked her to describe a typical week. Monday, my friend called in crisis about her marriage. I spent 3 hours talking her through it. Tuesday, my mother needed help with a decision, so I researched options for her all evening. Wednesday, my daughter was struggling at school, so I stayed up late creating a plan to fix it. Thursday, Jung interrupted, "And when did you do something for yourself?" Clara looked confused. "But I was doing something for myself. Helping them makes me feel good." "Does it? Or does it make you feel necessary?" Silence. Clara had never distinguished between the two. The rescue addiction, the compulsive need to find people in crisis so you can prove your importance by saving them. Jung observed that Clara wasn't attracted to stable, reciprocal relationships. She unconsciously sought people in constant crisis. Her closest friends were the ones with the most problems. Her romantic partners were the ones who needed the most fixing. Even her career choice, social work, put her in daily contact with suffering she could absorb. The pattern wasn't random, it was strategic. Without crisis to manage, Clara didn't know who she was. In session, Jung noted, "The helper becomes addicted not to helping, but to the identity of helper. They fear that without someone to rescue, they cease to exist." Historical example. Florence Nightingale revolutionized nursing through her empathic care during the Crimean War. But her letters reveal a darker pattern. She became increasingly dependent on crisis situations. In peacetime, she created conflicts with colleagues and family, unconsciously generating the suffering she needed to feel significant. After the war, she spent decades bedridden with mysterious illnesses that kept her family in constant crisis mode. Biographers note that she seemed most alive when managing others' emergencies, most depleted when life was peaceful. This is the rescue addiction in action. Unconsciously creating or seeking crisis because your sense of purpose depends on being needed. Research on codependency shows that helpers often report feeling most purposeful when depleted, most anxious when rested, most significant when sacrificing. The addiction isn't to the person, it's to the role. Clara began recognizing her pattern. She noticed how her anxiety spiked when friends were doing well, how she felt almost disappointed when her husband solved his own problem, how she unconsciously offered help before people asked for it, creating dependency so she could feel needed. "I thought I was being caring," she told Jung, "but I was being controlling. I needed them to need me." The rescue addiction makes crisis feel like purpose, which drives empaths to unconsciously seek suffering. But the rescue addiction is just the surface. The second pattern reveals why empaths can't imagine life without suffering. By their fourth session, Jung asked Clara to try something radical. For 1 week, don't help anyone unless they explicitly ask 3 times. Clara was horrified. But what if they need me and don't ask? What if I see them struggling and do nothing? What if you discover they're capable without you? Day 1. Clara's friend texted about a work problem. Clara's fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type 3 paragraphs of solutions. She put the phone down. The anxiety was crushing. Day 2. Her mother called, stressed about a decision. Clara listened but didn't offer advice. After they hung up, Clara paced her house for an hour. Who was she if she wasn't fixing this? Day 3. Her husband seemed worried about something. The old Clara would have spent the evening coaxing it out of him, analyzing it, solving it. This Clara just asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" He said no. She let it go. The discomfort was unbearable. Day 5. Clara experienced something she hadn't felt in years. Boredom. Without managing others' crises, she had nothing to do. Without carrying others' pain, she had no identity. Without suffering for someone, she felt empty. This revealed the second pattern, the suffering identity. Empaths don't just carry pain, they become the pain they carry. One woman Jung worked with told him, "If I'm not worrying about someone, I don't know what to do with myself. The worry has become who I am." Another patient. "I realized I introduced myself through my suffering. I'm the one who helps my alcoholic brother. I'm the one managing my mother's illness. Without their problems, I'm nobody." The suffering identity means defining yourself through the pain you absorb until you can't distinguish between your experience and theirs. Jung treated another empath, call her Elizabeth, who had an even more extreme version. She unconsciously created crises in her own life to have something to suffer through. When life was peaceful, she'd pick fights, make reckless decisions, or sabotage good situations. Jung realized she was addicted to suffering itself, because suffering was the only state where she felt real. Brain research on trauma bonding shows that chronic stress creates neural pathways that become familiar. When empaths spend years in heightened arousal from managing others' crises, calm feels dangerous. Chaos feels like home. Studies reveal that people who build identity around helping others experience anxiety when not needed. The brain literally associates significance with stress. Without stress, you question your place in the world. Clara discovered this in week 2 of Jung's experiment. Without crisis to manage, she felt purposeless. She actually missed the depletion. The exhaustion had been proof she mattered. "I'm terrified," she admitted in their next session. "If I'm not suffering for someone, who am I?" Perhaps that's the question you've been avoiding your entire life. Empaths build identity through suffering, which makes peace feel like annihilation. But even the suffering identity isn't the deepest pattern. The third pattern reveals the hidden equation that makes release feel impossible. What would happen if you stopped carrying everyone's pain? Clara's answer came immediately, viscerally. They wouldn't need me anymore. And if they don't need me, why would they love me? There it was, the equation. The wound beneath the wound. My significance equals my usefulness. My value equals my sacrifice. My lovability equals my depletion. The worth equation, the mathematical certainty that you are only lovable when you're suffering for someone else. In their 7th session, Clara traced this equation to age 7. Her mother had a breakdown after her father left. Clara became the emotional support, the parentified child, the one who held everything together. And for the first time in her young life, she felt important. "My mother told me I was her rock, her reason for living. I felt so valued. I didn't realize I was learning that my value came from her crisis." The equation solidified over years. Every time Clara absorbed pain, she received praise. Every time she sacrificed herself, she received validation. The neural pathway strengthened. Suffering for others equals being worthy of love. Studies on parentified children show that kids who become emotional caretakers develop what researchers call compulsive caregiving. They learn that their needs only matter when they're meeting others' needs first. Self-worth becomes conditional on self-sacrifice. Research on self-compassion reveals that caregivers score significantly lower on measures of inherent worth. They can feel significant when helping, but feel worthless when resting. The equation is hardwired. Clara discovered the full horror of her equation. She unconsciously believed that if she stopped suffering for others, she would become unlovable, unnecessary, disposable. The attachment wasn't just to helping, it was to the belief that helping was the only reason anyone would want her. "I've been terrified," she told Jung, tears streaming, "that if I set real boundaries, if I stop absorbing everyone's pain, they'll realize I have nothing else to offer, that without my usefulness, I'm worthless." Jung's response was gentle but devastating. "And so you've chosen to slowly die from depletion, rather than risk being unloved for who you actually are." Empaths believe their place in the world depends on sacrifice, which makes boundaries feel like becoming worthless. If you recognize these patterns, rescue addiction, suffering identity, worth equation, comment, "My value equals my suffering." These three patterns explain why every healing technique has failed. You're not trying to heal, you're trying to keep suffering more efficiently. But Jung discovered that releasing this belief requires something that feels impossible. In their 8th session, Jung gave Clara an instruction that seemed cruel. For 1 month, you're going to practice discovering that you matter even when you're not suffering for anyone. Clara protested. "But that's just self-affirmation. I've tried that. It doesn't work." "No," Jung said. "You're going to test it, behaviorally, by deliberately not rescuing when you have the opportunity and observing whether you cease to exist. The worth test, the counterintuitive practice of discovering your significance, exists independent of your suffering. The technique has 3 elements. Each element contradicts everything empaths believe about themselves." Jung taught Clara to catch herself in the moment the equation activated. Every time she felt the urge to rescue, pause, and identify the underlying belief. "If I don't help right now, I am..." and complete the sentence honestly. Clara's completions revealed the equation's power. A bad person, selfish, worthless, unlovable. The equation wasn't subtle. It was screaming beneath every helping impulse. Jung had her trace each completion back to its origin. When did she first learn that not helping made her bad? Age 7, when her mother's depression worsened, and Clara believed it was her job to fix it. When did she learn that boundaries made her selfish? Age 12, when she tried to focus on schoolwork, and her mother called her uncaring. The equation didn't form randomly. It was taught through repeated experiences, where love was conditional on her suffering. Neuroscience on belief formation shows that childhood equations create predictive models the brain uses automatically. If worth always appeared with suffering, your brain predicts you're insignificant without it. Clara spent 2 weeks just identifying the equation, not fighting it, not trying to change it, just seeing it clearly every time it activated. Jung's second instruction was more difficult. Now deliberately do the opposite of what the equation demands. When someone needs help and you want to rescue them, don't. Then observe. Do you cease to exist? Week 1. Her friend called in crisis about her marriage. Clara's entire body screamed to spend 3 hours talking her through it. Instead, she said, "That sounds really hard. I trust you'll figure it out." Then got off the phone. The anxiety was overwhelming. Clara was certain her friend would hate her, think she was cold, end the friendship. The equation was screaming, "You're worthless now. You failed. You're unlovable." But the next day, her friend texted, "Thanks for believing in me yesterday. I figured it out." The rescue hadn't been necessary. Clara's significance hadn't disappeared. The equation had lied. Week 2. Her mother called, needing Clara to research medical options for a minor health issue. Clara's pattern was to spend hours becoming an expert to prove her importance. Instead, she said, "That sounds stressful. Let me know what the doctor says." Her mother was frustrated. Clara felt guilty. The equation screamed that she was a terrible daughter, but she held the boundary. Her mother called back 2 days later. "I figured it out myself. I'm actually proud of myself." Again, the rescue hadn't been necessary. Again, Clara's place in the world remained. The equation was revealing itself as fiction. Jung explained, "The equation says you matter when you suffer for others. We're testing whether you matter when you don't. And every time you don't rescue and you still exist, still have relationships, still have meaning, the equation weakens." Research shows that behavioral experiments are more powerful than cognitive reframing. You can't think your way out of a belief. You must test it behaviorally and observe the results. Studies on boundary setting show that people who practice boundaries despite guilt report decreased anxiety over time. The brain updates its predictive model. I set a boundary, I still exist. The prediction was wrong. Clara practiced for 8 weeks. Each time she didn't rescue, the anxiety was intense. But each time she discovered, I still exist. I'm still loved. My importance didn't disappear. Over the next 8 weeks, Clara's daily life became the laboratory for discovering who she was when she wasn't suffering for anyone. Monday morning, she sat in stillness for 30 minutes. The anxiety was crushing. Her mind screamed, "You should be doing something. You're wasting time. You're being lazy." She stayed anyway. By minute 20, something shifted. A thought rose quietly. I'm sitting here. I'm not useful right now, and I still exist. Thursday afternoon, her friend offered to help her move furniture. The old Clara would have said, "No, I've got it. You don't need to do that." This Clara said, "Yes, thank you." The guilt was overwhelming. She felt like a burden, but underneath the guilt, relief. She mattered even when receiving. Her needs were important, even when she wasn't meeting others' needs first. Saturday evening, she spent 3 hours painting, not because it helped anyone, not because it served a purpose, just because it brought her joy. The old Clara would have dismissed this as selfish indulgence. This Clara recognized it as self-honoring, giving herself the same care she'd given others for decades. Each practice contradicted the equation. Stillness proved existence didn't require performance. Receiving proved she was lovable, even when not giving. Enjoyment proved her needs mattered. Over months, Clara began to experience something she'd never felt: significance that existed without performance. She could sit in stillness and feel present, not worthless. She could enjoy herself without guilt erasing the pleasure. She could receive help without needing to immediately reciprocate to prove her place in the world. Jung's technique worked not by fighting the equation, but by systematically disproving it through experience. You stop believing the equation, not because someone told you it's false, but because you lived evidence that it's false. If you're ready to test the equation, comment, "I'm testing my worth." Because when Clara released the hidden belief, her entire life transformed in ways she never expected. Clara implemented Jung's technique over 6 months. The transformation wasn't linear. It was terrifying, confusing, and ultimately liberating. The first 8 weeks felt like dying. Without the helper identity, Clara didn't know who she was. She'd wake up with panic attacks. Who am I if I'm not carrying everyone's burden? She'd look in the mirror and see a stranger. The Clara who sacrificed herself felt familiar. This new Clara who set boundaries felt like an imposter. Jung warned her this would happen. The ego death that comes with releasing this belief feels like annihilation, because the false self is dying. What you think of as you is actually just the equation in disguise. Clara experienced what Jung called the void, the empty space where identity used to be. Her friends noticed the change. Some asked if she was okay. "You seem different, distant. Are you depressed?" She wasn't depressed. She was grieving the version of herself who believed suffering made her important. Research on identity transformation describes this as the neutral zone, the period between old identity and new identity, where nothing feels solid. Most people retreat back to familiar patterns because the void is unbearable. But Clara stayed in the void. She let herself not know who she was. By spring, something shifted. Clara's friend called in crisis. Clara listened with genuine care. But when her friend asked for Clara to solve the problem, Clara said something she'd never said before. "I trust you'll figure this out. I'm here if you need to talk, but I'm not going to fix it for you." The old Clara would have experienced this as cruel. The new Clara recognized it as respect, believing her friend was capable. The difference was profound. Before, helping came from need. Clara needed to be needed. Now, helping came from choice. Clara chose to offer support without taking responsibility. Jung called this helping from fullness rather than emptiness. You give from overflow, not from the desperate attempt to prove your significance. Clara also discovered she could tolerate others' discomfort without rescuing. Her mother was stressed about a decision. The old Clara would have researched, analyzed, and decided for her. The new Clara said, "That sounds stressful. What do you think you should do?" Her mother figured it out, and their relationship improved. Her mother felt more capable. Clara felt less burdened. 6 months after beginning the work, Clara sat with Jung and said something that captured the entire transformation. "I spent yesterday reading a book, just for pleasure, and I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I should be doing something for someone else. I just enjoyed existing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered without doing anything to earn it." This was the fruit of releasing the attachment. Worth that didn't depend on performance. Significance that didn't require suffering. The shift in her relationships was remarkable. The people who depended on her constant rescue either stepped up to their own capability or left her life. The people who remained were the ones who valued her presence, not just her usefulness. Clara attracted new relationships, reciprocal ones, where both people gave and received. For the first time in her life, she experienced mutuality rather than one-way sacrifice. She could still feel others' emotions through her empathic sensitivity, but now she felt them without believing it was her job to fix them. She could witness suffering without absorbing it. She could care without depleting herself. The transformation Jung observed in Clara. Before release, significance equals suffering for others. Helped to feel important, depleted to prove goodness, sought people who needed constant rescue. Boundaries felt like betrayal. Peace felt like purposelessness. After release, worth equals inherent. Helped from overflow. Boundaries without guilt. Attracted reciprocal relationships. Could witness without rescuing. Peace felt like home. Jung noted that Clara's empathy didn't diminish. It matured. She still felt deeply. She still cared. But she no longer needed others' pain to feel like she mattered. Empathy without codependency. The ability to feel with others without losing yourself in others. If you've experienced the terror of releasing your helper identity, comment, "I'm in the void," because the aftermath of releasing this belief requires rebuilding your entire relationship with yourself and others. 6 months after releasing the attachment, Clara sat in Jung's office, describing a new challenge. "I feel free, but I also feel lost. I know who I'm not anymore. I'm not the endless helper, but I still don't fully know who I am." This is the final work, rebuilding identity on a foundation that isn't suffering. Jung's integration practices for life after release. Clara had to practice the hardest thing for an empath, doing nothing and feeling significant anyway. Daily stillness practice. Sit for 20 minutes without helping anyone, without being useful, without performing. Notice every time the mind says, you should be doing something. Question, should I? Or is that the old equation? Discover, I can sit here, I can just be. That's enough. This practice rewires the equation. Every minute you exist without performing and discover you still have meaning, the old belief weakens. Within 3 months, Clara could sit in stillness without anxiety. She discovered that being was enough. She didn't need to do to deserve existence. Clara learned to distinguish between helping from depletion and helping from overflow. The test was simple. Before helping anyone, pause and ask, am I doing this because I want to, or because I need to feel important? Will this deplete me, or is it genuine overflow? Am I helping them, or am I helping my need to be needed? If the answer revealed need rather than choice, Clara practiced saying no. At first, saying no felt impossible. The guilt was crushing. But each time she said no to compulsive helping and survived the guilt, the old equation weakened further. She discovered something profound. When she only helped from genuine overflow, her helping was more effective. She wasn't performing rescue to prove her significance. She was offering authentic support from fullness. Research on sustainable caregiving shows that helpers who maintain their own fullness report less burnout, more satisfaction, and better outcomes for those they help. Depletion doesn't make you a better helper, it makes you a resentful one. Over the following months, Clara's life became unrecognizable. She discovered she loved painting, not because it helped anyone, just because it brought joy. The old Clara would have dismissed this as selfish. The new Clara recognized it as self-honoring. She watched her daughter struggle with a school project without intervening. That sounds frustrating. What do you think you should try? Her daughter developed problem-solving skills Clara's rescuing had prevented. She let her husband handle his own work stress. I'm here if you need to talk, but I trust you'll figure it out. He found solutions Clara never would have thought of. She sat with friends who were struggling and offered presence without trying to fix them. I'm sorry you're going through this. I believe in your ability to handle it. Her friendships deepened, based on connection, not her usefulness. The hardest practice, tolerating others' growth. Watching people struggle without rescuing them felt cruel at first, but Clara realized her constant rescuing had been keeping people dependent. Her stepping back was actually the most loving thing she could do. True respect means believing people are capable of their own growth. Rescuing them implies they're incompetent. Trusting them honors their capability. Over months, she built a self-concept that included, I am someone who creates, who rests, who enjoys, who exists. Not just, I am someone who helps. After a year of this work, Clara told Jung, I can still feel deeply. I can still care. I can still help. But I no longer need your suffering to feel like I matter. I no longer need to carry your pain to believe I'm lovable. I can be with you in your struggle without taking your struggle as mine. Empathy matured, the ability to feel with others without losing yourself in others. I'm not less caring, Clara said. I'm finally caring in a way that doesn't destroy me, and that makes me more present, more helpful, more genuinely loving than I ever was when I was depleting myself to prove my significance. The most painful thing empaths must release isn't a person or a situation. It's the belief that you matter only when carrying others' pain. This attachment feels like identity itself. Releasing it feels like death. The void it leaves is terrifying. But what dies is only the false self, the version of you that believed suffering made you important. What remains is empathy without codependency, helping without depletion, love without sacrifice of self. Worth that exists because you exist, not because you're useful. The hidden belief, I matter when I suffer for others, is the foundation of the empath wound. Every healing technique fails until you release this. Every boundary feels impossible until you discover your significance isn't conditional on carrying pain. Clara's final insight captured the entire transformation. For my whole life, I thought my empathy was my curse. Now I see it was never empathy that hurt me. It was the belief that I was only lovable when I was suffering for others. I can keep the gift. I just released the wound. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join others releasing the core empath wound and discovering worth beyond suffering. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.